Hello, I'm Julia Bradbury, and that man on the screen, whichever way you're looking over there, is psychotherapist Jonathan Hoban. These are the lockdown sessions. Every week, Jonathan and I have been discussing topics that we think might be useful in this current climate. Mental health awareness is, of course, at the forefront of everybody's brains right now. And let's kick straight off, Jonathan, dealing with uncertainty. I know it's something that's come up with a lot of your clients in recent discussions as well. We have reached this very uncertain stage, haven't we, during lockdown?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of vague messaging coming out about what to do next or what to do now. How should we deal with that individually?
Well, I think when the messaging is very uncertain, very ambiguous, that can lead us to feel very powerless, even further out of control. And where we want stability, that lack of clarity, that lack of understanding, but that lack of clear directive will lead us to feeling very anxious, very stressed. So I think when it's not provided from an external source, it's very much about how do we provide that certainty for ourselves. So with whatever's going on out there in life generally, because I will make it general, because I think we will face different instances in our life where this will come up again. I think when there's uncertainty and I feel out of control, what things in my life do I have control over as well? I also think with that uncertainty, where can I provide certainty? And I think it's not just, I think there's certainly, I feel, with wherever it comes from in any relationship, if there's not a clear directive, if someone's beating around the bush or they're just not being, again, it's very ambiguous. It's about, okay, so I'm not getting my answers from them. What answers can I give myself? And there's something that leads us back to our intuition and our own sort of interpersonal relationship. What is it that I need to do? Yeah, what is it? And that's something that we do have control over, for sure. So I think we're generally in an environment where there's uncertainty in what areas of your life, and in areas of your life where you may feel powerless. What can I do that makes me feel powerful? And what things can I do that provides me with that feeling of certainty, even if it's listening to your own directive?
And should you write those things down? Because I suppose there could be a danger in that situation where the annoying little chatterbox, the negative chatterbox, somewhere on your shoulder might then start to overtake, and then you're losing control of that as well. So how do you sort of prioritize what you can control? How do you manage that bit of you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think with it, I think there's that, what we do is we definitely go out in our day, we simplify our day as much as we can. Because I think what we tend to do when we're feeling anxious, because this all comes back to anxiety, where there's a chatterbox, it comes back to general anxiety. We tend to do more and more and more and more. So like if a boat's sinking, we tend to add more cargo rather than take off the cargo. So I think simplification of your day is absolutely key. And I think it's making it manageable. What are the manageable tasks that I can do? I think when we get generally, if you feel anxious, we start to become, we're drawn very inward, aren't we? So we stop listening, or we stop being present to what's happening on the outside, in our environment, and we start to become just worrying about everything and sort of getting very, getting very self-involved. So I think it's, whether it be cleaning, or my friend's, she's from Sicily, she's an avid cleaner, so she does cleaning, but that really helps, anything that can give us an external focus. Anything that we can do for someone else, it can just change that focus on your day, and that can actually really get rid of that chatterbox. Also, with the inner parenting, it's kind of quite literally, if there's an inner bully, I'm not listening to it. I literally have it there chattering. I just don't engage with it. If you engage with the bully goes, oh, I'm getting a response. Now I've got their attention, and it gets louder and louder. If you disengage with it, it gets bored. So that's my best advice I can give regarding that.
That's good tip there. A lot of people are genuinely concerned about their children going back to school. And sorry if you don't have children, but it's a big topic at the moment, because there's a lot of talk about when children go back to school. Governments around the world all face this big problem. Until children go back to school, people can't go back to work. And going back to work has huge psychological implications and obviously massive economic implications as well. So we know that governments around the world are treading a very, very difficult line. But what should we be doing as parents when it comes to this advice? Because I think a lot of people out there are concerned. They're being told that their children can go back to school on a certain date, and they're just not sure instinctively that that is right. And they might be torn because they also need to go back to work, and they can't do it unless they send their children back to school. But are they doing the wrong thing by sort of pushing their kids back to school for the economics of themselves?
My advice is what's your body saying? My body's become so reactive this week. My brain's saying one thing, my body's saying another. You know, my heart was pounding. I instantly felt as a parent, I don't want to be pressurized to put my kid back to school. Do I have to put my kid back in school? For me personally, there's no way my kid is going back to school in June until I see more accurate data, more consistent data, so I know the safety and well-being of my child is fine. You know, I'm not about to, you know, take any risks with that whatsoever. And that's what my intuition is saying. And I've got a real relationship with my intuition. I've got real intuition with my intuition. I've got a real trust with my intuition because I've developed that relationship over time by listening to it. If you're someone that's guided by the head, and you don't listen to that, your intuition, it's like if in any external relationship, if you don't listen to your partner, why would they trust you? It creates a distance. So now is a time, I think, where we all need to be very much guided by how our body is reacting, that alarm going off inside of us. There's a threat, is there a danger? Especially when, you know, guidelines, in my opinion, become blurred. There's a lack of clarity. There's a huge contradiction. It's confusing. And I also think where there's a breakdown in trust, there is more of a reluctance to, of course, take advice. We shut down. And again, that creates more stress because it creates distance in a relationship. We feel more on our own. We feel more isolated. We don't feel there's a parent guiding us by the hand. But we have to start, in this instance, becoming our own leaders. And by that, I mean, in terms of, certainly in my instance, it's my family. They are my kids. And it's going to come down to my decision ultimately. I was bullied as a kid, and when I was bullied, I was very indecisive. I would people please. I would always do what other people wanted me to do, and I would end up abandoning myself. And I would feel that real sort of that real distance within myself. And I always hated myself for doing that afterwards. I said, why did I take that advice? You know, and I started to blame myself. And I felt more out of control and more anxious because I wasn't listening to what my intuition told me. So now I've got this very strong relationship with my intuition that's built up over time. It's clearly saying that's not happening where my child is concerned. And I do think we now need to be led by our intuition. It's a wonderful part of our brain. It's a wonderfully prehistoric part of our brain. And we're in the wild at the minute, aren't we? You know?
Yeah, Walk with Your Wolf. That's his book.
Yeah.
Appropriate. We are all animals. I'm going to put you on the spot. We haven't talked about this before, but so to give me your instinctive answer to this.
Go road.
I'm a parent. I have to go back to work for monetary reasons, which means I have to send my kids back to school, but I'm not certain it's the right thing to do for them. How do I handle the guilt? How do I manage that emotion where I've made the decision, I've got to do it, so my kid is going to go back to school?
How do you handle the guilt? What, by putting your kid back into school?
How do I handle that myself?
Well, why would you do it if you felt guilty?
Because I need to get back to work, because I need to pay the rent this month. I need to put food.
You have to, so comes the choice. I understand that, absolutely, but you have to weigh up the severity of what we're actually dealing with here. What's more important? Is it your job's important, finance is important, and money's important, or is it your life or your child's life? It's hard choices. The hardest thing, having worked, I've been speaking to NHS frontline workers. I provide some low cost and free sessions for them as well. And it really brings me into what they're seeing. And we weren't going to talk about this, but just very, very quickly, even with myself, you get so into your bubble. The NHS frontline workers, what's happening with them becomes out of sight and out of mind. If you were there every day seeing what they're seeing, there would be no, I feel, I can't speak for everyone, there would be a very clear choice. Am I going to put my kid potentially in that danger? And you do have to weigh up. I've gone through periods of my life. I had £30 a week at one point. I had to make that for 3 years. Really hard times. I really had to struggle. My feeling, I respect whether you're a single mum, whether you're financially struggling. It's really, really hard. I get it. You can be strategic. You can figure it out. You can work it out. You can live on very, very little. Someone can say, well, that's easy for you to say. But you have to weigh up, you know, what's it going to be? Is it going to be potentially putting my child at risk? Or is it going to be not struggling with its finances? It's a difficult one, but I think, again, you need to be led by your intuition. I think finances, of course, is a big issue right now. I understand that people are struggling with finances, and it's really, really difficult. And some people might say, well, that's easy for you to say. I've been there, I understand, but you do have to weigh up the welfare of your child's safety and your safety. And this is, we are in a life and death situation. And if you're not facing it on a day-to-day basis, it's going to become a bit more desensitized. But if you were coming face to face with it every day, I'm wondering what your decision-making process would be.
Let's talk about sleep.
Yes.
Sleep is something that has really risen to the top of the agenda with science and medical research, I would say, in the last decade. There's a great book by Professor Matthew Walker, called Sleep. Get it, read it, do a bit of Googling and researching on it if you would like. But we now all know that sleep is the very foundation of our health. When we are sleeping, we're reviving our brains, we are repairing our bodies, we are resetting our internal clocks. It's no accident that if you're being tortured, sleep deprivation is up there, and right up there with waterboarding. We can die from a lack of sleep. So yeah. It's incredibly important, and yet here we all are in this very stressful time when we need more sleep than ever, and so many of us are struggling to sleep.
Are you a big sleeper? Are you a big napper?
I'm a big sleeper. I need 7 or 8 hours sleep a night, and generally, I'm a good sleeper. But of course, like everybody, I'm having nights and bouts of insomnia. What do we do?
Yeah. It's the same for me actually as well. It's the same for a lot of people at the minute. I'm a big sleeper. I'm a real napper, and I've struggled to even allow myself to nap. The thing is, when you're I think this has become quite normalised. It's become a baseline being in isolation now, and I think. Do we have a baseline from when things are kind of, when we're in a state of normality? I think we have to just, you know what I mean? I think this is unprecedented again, and we're having unprecedented reactions. I think for me, sleep in the evening, number one, is 2 things. It's a time where the world is still, and we can be with our thoughts. We can process the day. We're dealing with high adrenaline. It takes longer for that adrenaline to kind of come down, for sure. So what can we actually do? I mean, breathing techniques work, of course. For me, if you miss that first circadian rhythm where you go, so if you get into bed at 9 or 10 o'clock, you go into your first circadian rhythm. So at 12, you'll hit alpha, you come out probably at about sort of 2 o'clock. Mm. So in the jungle, you'd have to go to the toilet, you'd be aware of predators, so you'd come out of that sleep cycle, and then you go into your second one. So I am, at the minute, I'm sort of, insomnia is where you're frustrated and stressed and you're internalizing those energies, and that's creating more adrenaline. And so again, it shows the presence of stress. So what really helps me is I go for a walk in the evening, under a blanket of stars. It produces oxytocin. It really helps me to go to sleep. I know we can't only go out once a day, but now that that's being changed, that really helps me personally. I think if you're trying to get to sleep, you have to accept that you might have a sleepless night with insomnia, because the more pressure you put yourself under, the worse it gets. It's like someone going, sleep, sleep, sleep. Like going, that's not helping me, man. It's really not. So you have to get rid of the army sergeant in your head. And also, if you're thinking, I'm going to be knackered tomorrow, hey, you're going to be knackered tomorrow. You are welcome to the world of parenting for those that are going through, especially those early days. Yeah. It's not as bad as you think. But if you can't sleep, I think things like laughter is great, actually. I love a bit of Only Fools and Horses, I really do. And because laughter produces oxytocin as well, which makes you feel relaxed, you know. And Monty Python have been getting into a little bit of that. It's fantastic. So that's cool. For anyone, there was a message that someone put on your Twitter or mine. I can't remember, and I'm so sorry to hear this. They lost someone due to the virus, and they had the fear of the virus. They were getting ruminating thoughts. It sounded like in the evening. So I hope if they're watching, this is my advice to you. When my brother died of a methadone overdose when I was 22, and it happened very suddenly, and it was very traumatic for me. And getting to sleep at night was incredibly difficult. I felt really alone, you know, even though it's impossible. I felt going through grief, I found it very hard to reach out because I didn't know what to say. It was very hard for other people to know how to meet my needs because communication had broken down. And what do you say to someone that's at a loss, quite literally, and everyone's at a loss? What really helped me is I watched movies where I could really identify with. Either it was a movie where someone had actually died. It allowed me to cry. It didn't allow me to feel alone in my experience, and it allowed me to calm. And so for anyone who's been through a bereavement, I'd say finding a film that explores grief. We don't want to normally watch those films, but weirdly it brings a sense of comfort. And that would be my advice to anyone who has lost a family member and is struggling to sleep under those circumstances.
That's really interesting. So rather than it sort of being, you could look at that and you could think, oh, you were wallowing a little bit and making it worse. But actually what you're saying is it's giving you a reason to cry and to have those feelings that of course you would have if you've lost someone. Because we're all allowed to cry in the movies. So it's a real...
Sorry. Yeah, there is connection. Sorry I interrupted you, Julia. There's a bit of a lag there. But it was, but yeah, absolutely. And also it's informative. I watched The Monster Calls. And what I loved about that film, I never really recognized this because it was quite parallel to my early childhood. But what was so wonderful is the mother at the end, it said, all these difficult feelings you're allowed to have. They're complex. You're not meant to sort them out. You know, and it's giving permission for you to have those feelings once again. And you have to just ride out the storm. It's incredibly difficult. I think there's no timeline for grief. You know, I mean, I can look back even after 20 odd years, 26 years, and I can suddenly go, where's my mum? I want my mum. I miss my mum. I miss my brother. We can. So, but I think definitely not feeling on your own. I think when the best listeners, I mean, Cruise is a wonderful bereavement site and it's free. And you know, you're trained just to listen, to be really, really attentive. So just in the evening, we can feel, for those on their own, they can feel more alone. You know, I'm in a family setting for people that are on their own. They're on their own. So Only Fools and Horses, I feel like I'm part of their family for that period of time, and it can help me de-stress. So that's my advice. Yeah, watching things where you can feel you're part of a community, or you can get that sense of identification with the issue you're currently facing.
We've had lots of messages. People are engaging with us on social media, and we're trying to pick up on general topics. I'm going to go to a specific message because I think many people will resonate with this. It's a message from Cheryl, who contacted me on Twitter, and she would like tips on how to remain in the moment. Well, arguably right now we don't want to remain, all of us collectively, in this moment. But I think what she's referring to is something that we've heard, FOMO, this new expression that popped out of the ether, the fear of missing out, the what ifs. What if this had happened? What if that had happened? What if I'd behaved differently or reacted differently to that situation? So how do we, I think my camera slipped down a little bit. I'll just click that back in. So how do we savor the moment? How do we sort of really relish that expression? Every day may not be a good day, but there is good in every day.
That's a great line, isn't it? Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there is. I got ADD. My brain can go, you know, here and there and absolutely everywhere. So I've had to learn how to focus. When we're anxious, our brain overthinks anyway. It just generally goes into that spin cycle, what's called washing machine head, like full spin, you know. So it can become, we can go into things that have happened in the past. We can go into things that have happened in the future. We can get into catastrophizing. We just become generally worried and angsty. I had a friend of mine who also said she felt very anxious about what if I haven't made the most of this time? So I think it's general anxiety. Things like gardening are fantastic, actually, if you've got a garden. If you don't, have a plant pot. I think things that give you a kind of point of focus, it's retraining the brain. For me, I've always loved walking, because when I walk, it's like it helps me to, if I've got a kind of lots of worries, it's like lots of separate files that I put in this exercise put in my book. It's got like lots of files. And also prior to the pandemic, may have lots of backlog of refining to do. Yeah. So when I go for a walk in nature, it helps me to slowly, very naturally, well, the oxytocin helps me calm things down. The presence of looking at the sky. For the first bit of the walk, I might be still within my head, but just carry on walking, carry on going. But I will slowly start to reprocess my thoughts, go through those files and go, right, I've dealt with that one, dealt with that one, dealt with that one. So for me, walking has always been a great way of refiling any of that kind of emotional backlog. The oxytocin helps you calm down. And by the end of the walk, I come back, I've got rid of any negative energy that can encourage that spin cycle. And it helps me personally to be really present. Also doing good deeds for other people. My sister is building masks for for people in the NHS at the minute. Yeah, absolutely. She was actually a nurse. She used to write for the Nursing Times, and she's very passionate about what workers are going through right now. So it's a mindful activity for her. It's one that kind of, I would imagine, lowers her anxiety. She feels it gives her a sense of purpose, which is so important right now.
And she's constructively helping. It's a bit, it's like what you and I are doing now. We're doing it because we want to feel that we're helping, that there are people who need this kind of advice out there. And it makes us feel purposeful, as well as hopefully helping other people. And again, that's back to the oxytocin level thing, isn't it?
It does, yeah, and esteemable. It's an esteemable duty. It's a confidence booster. We can get awfully stuck in our own head, and the problem can all become about us. It's just the ego, and I don't mean ego in a negative way. The ego can work for us and it can work against us. So just take it out of the equation. So when you do these activities, it becomes about what you're doing. If something's in front of you, that's what your focus is on. Yeah. That sense of purpose is enormous. It helps. You have to structure it into your day as well. It's a discipline, and it just generally helps that sort of ability to focus on one thing, and that stops your brain going inward. Yeah.
Great. Well, Jonathan, we've run out of time again. We try and keep this session to about half an hour, so it's a sort of an easy bite-sized chunk for people. Great advice about sleep there, dealing with uncertainty, and hopefully we've cleared something up for Cheryl as well. If anybody out there has any questions, any topics that they would like us to cover in future sessions, then we would be happy to. And also, you and I mention books and films and things quite a lot. So I think what we should start doing is everything is up on the outdoorguide.co.uk, and it's also up on our social media feeds and on Jonathan's website as well. And I think what we'll do is we'll do an index of all the books and things that we mentioned, because everybody always likes to, I get messages saying, oh, what was the book you mentioned? And I'm sure they'll do the same with the movies that you've talked about. So we'll make sure that resource is available for people as well. Psychotherapist Jonathan Hoban, thank you very much as ever. I'm Julia Bradbury. These are the lockdown sessions, and we shall see you all next time. Take care.